Hi and welcome to Sadie's Spincraft. This is a spin and story time. You will be hearing at least 2 chapters. I hope it's 3, fingers crossed, but we'll see where we fit. I'm spinning up the Superfine Merino, which is 14.5 microns, blended with cashmere. It was dyed in a jar last year. I can say that now, even though it was probably 2 months ago. But yeah, I dyed that last year in a jar on a video. Go onto the channel and have a look for it. Please, if you are new to the channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any more future uploads. And I'll get on with the story now. This will be Poison Study by Maria V. Schneider. Chapter 22. I recognised that stride. My heartbeat melted as I watched Rand's limp to Star's house, knocking twice. She admitted Rand into her home without a moment's hesitation. The faint thump of the closing door echoed hollowly in my chest. Another test? I asked Valak with desperate urgency. Is he working for you? But I knew the answer deep in my soul. Even before I saw the sad shake of his head, I felt empty, as if every emotion had been wrenched out of me. It was just too much. After Rayad's ghost, Nyx's attack, and Valak's test, I was mentally unable to handle another blow. I just stared at Valak with no thoughts, no feelings, and no desires. Valak motioned me to follow him. I complied. We circled around to the back of Star's house, entering the building to the left. We padded up 3 stories. The interior was dark and empty except for the top floor. One of Valak's men sat cross-legged with his back resting against the wall, shared with Star's study. He wrote in a notebook, using a single candle as illumination. Rand's voice could be heard clearly. Using hand signals, Valak communicated with the man. He gave the notebook to Valak and disappeared down the steps. Valak sat in the man's spot and then tapped the floor next to him. I crouched beside him, facing the wall. I had no desire to hear Rand's deceit, but I didn't have the willpower to leave. Valak pointed to an array of small holes in the wood. I peered through. All I could see was the back of a piece of furniture. I guessed that the holes were for listening purposes only. Squatting on the floor, I rested my forehead against the wall and closed my eyes as I eavesdropped on Rand's conversation. Generals are coming to town this week. That's nothing new, but the commander ordered a feast. So something's up, something significant, but I haven't been able to figure it out. Rand said. Let me know as soon as possible, Star replied. Then she paused. Maybe Elena knows what's going on. My heart lurched when I heard my name. Run away, run away, run away, my mind screamed. But I only pressed my forehead harder to the wall. I doubted. She was surprised when I mentioned the feast, so I didn't ask her. She might know more later this week. I'll try again. Don't bother. I'll ask her myself. The sleek tone of Star's voice implied that she had concealed this revelation until the time when exposing it would cause maximum damage. "Yelena?" Rand sputtered. "Working for you? Impossible. That's not her style." "Are you suggesting she's working for Valak?" Alarm tightened her voice. Equally upset, I glanced at Valak. He shook his head, waving his hand in a "don't worry" gesture. "No, she wouldn't." Rand had recovered. "I'm just surprised, but I shouldn't be. She could use the money, and who am I to think any less of her for it?" "Well, you shouldn't be thinking of her at all. As I see it, she's disposable. The only concern I have when she dies is who's going to replace her and how quickly can I bribe him?" "Star, once again, you've shown me in the most repulsive way that the sooner I pay off my debt to you, the better. How much credit do I get for tonight's information?" "2 silvers. I'll mark it in my book, but it won't make much difference." "What do you mean? Haven't you figured it out by now? You'll never pay off your debt. As soon as you get close, you always gamble yourself right back down another hole. You're too weak, Rand. Too swayed by your own emotions, easily addicted, and lacking in willpower." "Oh, that's right. You claim to be a magician. Have you read my mind, Captain? Captain Star? What a laugh. If you really had magic, Valak would have taken care of you long ago. I know you're not as smart as you claim." The heavy, uneven tread of footsteps resounded through the wall as Rand started to walk away. I was astounded. I had never heard Rand speak with such harsh sarcasm before. And more than that, if Star was a magician, I could be in serious danger. My mind spun, but it was all too complex to contemplate at this time. "I don't need to read your mind," Star called after him. "All I have to do is review your history, Rand. It's all there." Silence settled. The only noise coming from Star's study was the crinkle of paper being turned. Valak stood, pulling me up with him. His man had returned. Handing him the notebook, Valak descended the steps. I followed Valak through the dark streets of Castletown. We kept to the shadows, avoiding the patrolman. Once we had escaped the city limits, Valak relaxed and walked beside me on the main road to the castle. "I'm sorry," Valak said. "I know Rand was your friend." His use of the past tense jabbed like a knife's point between my ribs. "How long have you known?" I asked. "I've suspected for the last 3 months, but only procured the hard evidence this month." "What tipped you off?" "Rand and his staff helped me with that poison test I gave you. He stayed while I laced the food with poison. I left that goblet of peach juice on my desk to keep it clean. It was a fair test. Blackberry poison was in that cup, but I didn't put it there." Valak paused, letting the information sink in. "An interesting property of blackberries is that only when they're prepared in a special solution of grain alcohol and yeast and cooked with extreme care to the proper temperature are they poisonous. Most cooks, and certainly not their assistants, don't possess the skill or the knowledge to achieve that result." Valak sounded as if he admired Rand's ability to brew the poison. The full understanding that Rand had tried to poison me almost knocked me off my feet. I stumbled as a surge of nausea boiled in my stomach. Dashing to the side of the road, I vomited into the bushes. Only when my body had ceased its convulsions did I realise Valak was supporting me. One of his arms was wrapped around my waist, while a cold hand pressed against my forehead. "Thanks," I said, wiping my chin clean with leaves. With trembling legs, I let Valak lead me to the castle. If he hadn't continued to support me, I would have curled up on the ground and called it a night. "There's more. Do you want to hear it?" he asked. "No, the truth, but..." We drew closer to the outer wall of the castle complex. I made an ugly connection. Did Rand set me up at the fire festival? In a way. That's not an answer. The goons that nabbed you waited for you near the baking tent, so I suspected that Rand had told Star you would be there. But then he wouldn't let you out of his sight. It was as if he was protecting you. Remember how upset he was when he couldn't find you, how relieved he was when he spotted you, alive and whole? "I thought he was drunk," I said. "I suspect Rand is an unwilling participant. At the time of the poison test, he hardly knew you, but as your friendship grew, I imagine he finds himself in a difficult situation. He doesn't want to hurt you, but he needs to pay off his gambling debt. Star has an extensive organisation with plenty more thugs to replace the ones I took care of. Thugs who would be willing to break a few bones for their boss. Does that make you feel any better?" No. My reaction to Rand's betrayal seemed extreme even to me, but I couldn't switch it off. It wasn't the first time someone had played false with me, and it wasn't going to be the last. Brazil had deceived me. I had loved him like a father and been loyal to him. In the end, it took almost a year of enduring his experiments before my feelings dwindled to the point where I could see him as he really was. But I had always known my young devotion to him was one-sided. Since he had never given me any reason to think he cared for me, his actions had been easier to stomach. Rand's friendship, on the other hand, appeared genuine. I had begun to feel as if I had finally made a decent-sized hole in the stone barricade I had built around myself, big enough for me to slip through and enjoy our time together. Now the wall was crumbling. I felt stones pelting me and burying me deep beneath the rubble. How could I trust anyone again? "Anything else you want to tell me?" I asked Valak as we stopped a few feet short of the castle's southern entrance. "Did Ari and Janko set me up for Nick's attack? Do you have another test of loyalty for me up your sleeve? Maybe the next time I'll actually fail. A prospect that seems appealing." I pushed away Valak's supporting arm. "When you warned me that you would test me from time to time, I thought you meant spiking my food. But it seems there is more than one way to poison a person's heart, and it doesn't even require a meal." "Everyone makes choices in life, some bad, some good. It's called living, and if you want to bow out, then go right ahead. But don't do it halfway. Don't linger in whiner's limbo," Valak said, his gruff voice. "I don't know what horrors you faced prior to your arrival in our dungeon. If I had to guess, I would think you were worse than what you have discovered tonight. They were worse than what you discovered tonight. Perhaps that will put things into perspective." He strode into the castle. I leaned against the cold wall, resting my head on the unyielding surface. Maybe if I stayed here long enough, my heart would turn to stone. Then betrayals, tests of loyalties and poisons would have no effect on me, but the cold eventually drove me inside. Apply force on the wrench, not too much. You need firm yet gentle touch, Janko said. With healing hands still sore, I clumsily placed the tension wrench into the keyhole and applied pressure. Now, use your diamond pick to lift the pin that's trapped by the tension. Lift it until it breaks, he instructed. Breaks? I asked. Reaches alignment. When you put a key into a lock, the metal ridges push the pins up so you can turn the cylinder and open the lock. The pins hold the cylinder in place. You'll need to do one pin at a time and continue the pressure. I slid the pick into the lock past the wrench. I manoeuvred the pick, lifting each of the 5 pins. I could feel the tiny vibration in my finger joints as each pin broke with a subtle yet distinct click. When they were all aligned, the cylinder turned and the door unlocked. Good job! Damn you, Lena, you're a fast learner. Janko paused, his brow creased in concern. You're not going to use this to do something stupid, right, and get us into trouble? Define stupid, I said. When Janko's eyes widened, I added, Don't worry, I'm the only one who would get into trouble. He relaxed, and I practiced on another lock. We were in the lower level of the castle, where no one could surprise us. It had been 4 days since the night I had learned about Rand. Valak's orders had been to act as if nothing had happened. He wanted to discover the full extent of Star's organisation before exposing them. Valak was a true predator, I thought sourly, eyeing his prey before pouncing for the kill. I knew I wasn't ready to play the friend to Rand, so I had been avoiding him, which wasn't too hard to do. The castle crawled with generals and their retinues, making every worker in the complex busy, including Rand. Brazil was another reason. I was glad to be out of sight. His black and green soldiers had infected the castle, and keeping away from them was becoming difficult, although I didn't mind hiding in Valak's suite. He had stolen a box of Crelio, and I was content to munch a piece each time I tasted the commander's food. Harry, Janko and I had postponed our training sessions for the duration of the general's visit, but I had managed to rope Janko into teaching me to pick locks. Giving him the gold coin from Star had provided an added incentive. Valak had said I could keep it since working undercover wasn't part of the food taster's job. But the heavy weight of it in my pocket had been a constant reminder of Rand's treachery, so I decided to put it to good use. This last lock has 10 pins. If you can open this one, you'll be able to handle all the pin tumbler locks or key locks in the castle, except the dungeon bolts. They're complicated, and it's not like you can practice on them. Janko's forehead furrowed. You're not going to need that skill, are you? I sincerely hope not. Good. After several failed attempts, I managed to pop the lock open. Now you need to practice. The quicker you can spring a lock, the better, Janko instructed. I would let you borrow my picks, but I never know exactly when I might need them. He winked, a mischievous glint sparkling in his eye. So, He pulled another set out of his pocket. I used that coin you gave me to buy a set for you. He handed me a black cloth case. That money was for you. Oh, there's plenty left, even after I bought you this. He flourished an ebony-coloured wooden rod as long as my hand. It was decorated with a bright silver button, and silver symbols were engraved on the side. What's that? I asked. Push the button, he said with glee. I pressed down with my thumb and started when a long gleaming blade shot out. It was a switchblade. Amazed, I stared at my gifts. Thank you, Janko, but why did you buy these for me? Guilt, I suppose. Guilt? Not the answer I had expected. I called you a criminal. I was a criminal. I was once a criminal, but I've gone past it, and no one has held it against me. Besides, I have a terrible feeling you may need them. General Brazil's soldiers have been swaggering around the barracks, bragging about who is going to take out Rayad's killer. They're quite imaginative, and I had to hold Harry back from challenging the lot a couple of times. 10 against 1 isn't good odds, even for Harry and me. I'll stay away from them, I said. Good. I'd better get moving. I've drawn the night shift, but first I'll escort you to your room. That's not necessary. Harry would kill me if I didn't. We walked together toward Valak's suite. When we reached the corner before the main doors, Janko stopped just out of sight of the guards. Almost forgot, he said, reaching into his uniform pocket. He pulled out a sheath for the switchblade. It goes around your right thigh. Remember to make a nice big hole in your pants pocket so when you pull the weapon, it won't get caught in the fabric. He was about to leave when I stopped him. Janko, what about these symbols? I pointed to the silver markings on the handle of the knife. Janko smiled. They're the old battle symbols used by the king when he sent out messages and orders during war times. It didn't matter if the enemy intercepted them because they were unintelligible to anyone who didn't know how to decipher them. Some of the soldiers still use them. They work well in military exercises. What do they say? His grin widened. Too easy, Elena. I'm sure you'll figure it out. Eventually. Always the prankster, Janko laughed with delight. Come here, I said, so I can punch you. I'd love to oblige you, my dear. Janko dodged beyond my reach, but I'm late. Chapter 23. After hiding Janko's gifts deep in my uniform pocket, I went into Valak's suite. He was working at his desk, but he looked up as soon as I entered the room, giving me the impression that he had been waiting for me. Where have you been? He asked. With Janko, I said, but I was wary as long as I arrived at the scheduled times during the day. Valak didn't ask about what I did with my free time. Doing what? Valak demanded, standing with his hands on his hips. The comical image of a jealous husband popped into my mind. I stifled a laugh. Discussing fighting tactics. Oh, Valak relaxed his stance, but moved his arms awkwardly as if he felt he had overreacted and was trying to cover it up. Well, that's all right, but from now on I need to know where you are at all times, and I suggest you stay in the castle and keep a low profile for a while. General Brazil's guards have set a bounty on your head. A bounty? Fear pulsed through my chest. It could be a rumour or just drunken soldiers' talk, but until they leave, I want you protected. Valak's tone was firm, but then he added, I don't want to train another taster. I'll be careful. No, you'll be paranoid. You'll move in a crowd, keep to well-lit areas, and you'll make certain to have an escort with you whenever you're walking down empty hallways late at night. Understood? Yes, sir. Good. The General's brandy meeting is scheduled for tomorrow evening. Each general will bring a bottle of his finest brandy to share as they discuss Ixian business late into the night. You will be needed to taste the commander's drinks. Valak lifted a box of 8 bottles from the floor. They clinked musically as he set the carton on the table. Pulling out a small drinking glass, he said, I want you to sample each brandy once tonight and at least twice tomorrow, so you know how each tastes clean of poisons. He handed me the glass. Each bottle is labelled according to the type of brandy and which general is bringing it. I grabbed a decanter at random. It was General Dino's cherry brandy made in MD8. Pouring a mouthful, I took a sip and rolled the liquid around my tongue, attempting to commit the taste to memory before swallowing. The strong alcohol burned my throat, leaving behind a small fire in my chest. My face flushed with the heat. I suggest you use the slurp and spit method so you don't get drunk, Valak said. Good point. I found another glass for spitting and then worked my way through the remainder of the bottles. On the day of the meeting, I tasted each brandy twice more in Valak's suite and then tested myself with a third round. Only when I could pinpoint by taste alone which cordial belonged to which general was I satisfied. That night I waited for Valak to escort me to the war room. He was downstairs, decked out in full dress uniform. Red braids draped his shoulders. Medals were lined up 6 deep over his left breast. He oozed dignity, a man of stature. I would have been impressed, except for the uncomfortable and peevish look he wore. A petulant child forced to wear his best clothes. I covered my mouth, but was unable to block my laughter. Enough! I have to wear this damn thing once a year, and as far as I'm concerned, it's one too many. Valak tugged at his collar. Ready? I joined him at the door. The uniform enhanced his athletic body, and my thoughts drifted how magnificent he would look with his uniform puddled around his feet. You look stunning, I blurted. Mortified, I blushed as a rush of heat spread through my body. I must have swallowed more brandy than I'd realised. Really? Valak glanced down at his uniform. Then he set his shoulders back and stopped yanking at his collar. His cross expression changed to a thoughtful smile. Yes, you do, I said. We arrived in the commander's war room just as the generals assembled. The long, slender, stained glass windows glowed with the weak light of the setting sun. Servants scurried around the circular chamber, lighting lanterns and arranging platters of food and drink. Medals and buttons sparkled. I knew only 3 generals by sight. The rest I deduced by the colour of the diamonds on their otherwise black uniforms. Scrutinising their faces, I memorised their different features in case Valak tested me later. Brazil glared when I made eye contact. Advisor Mokgan stood there next to him, and I shivered as Mokgan's eyes slid over me with cunning appraisal. When Brazil and Rayad had performed their experiments on me, Mokgan had always hovered nearby. His presence, sensed but unseen, had given me violent nightmares. Brazil's usual advisors were missing. I wondered why he had brought Mokgan instead. The commander sat at the tip of the egg-shaped conference table. His uniform was simple and elegant, with real diamonds stitched onto his collar. The generals, flanked by their advisors, seated themselves around the rest of the table. Valak's chair was to the commander's right, and my stool was placed behind them, against the only stone wall in the room. I knew the meeting would last all night, and I was glad I would be able to rest my back. Another advantage to my position was that I wasn't in direct sight of Brazil. Although I could avoid seeing the poisonous looks he might flash my way, I couldn't hide from Mokgan's pointed stares. The commander pounded a wooden gavel on the table. Silence fell. Before we launch into the scheduled topics, the commander said, indicating the detailed agenda which had been distributed earlier, I have an important announcement. I have appointed a new successor. A murmur rippled through the war room as the commander walked around the table and handed a sealed envelope to each general. Inside the envelopes were 8 pieces to an encoded puzzle that would reveal the new successor's name when deciphered by Valak's key. Tension permeated the room. I felt it pressing against me like an overfilled water skin about to burst. A maelstrom of expressions, surprise, anger, concern, contemplation, crossed the generals' faces. General Masuson of MD7 whispered into his advisor's ear, the general's cheeks turning as red as his hair and moustache. I leaned forward in my seat and saw Brazil struggling to keep his face neutral as delight tweaked at his features. Instead of erupting, the tension simmered and leaked away as the commander ignored it by beginning the meeting. Items related to MD1 were the first order of business, to be followed by each district in order. As a bottle of General Kitvian's special white brandy slid around the table, the generals discussed snowcats and mining rights. Come on, Kit. Enough about the cats. Just feed them up on the pack ice on the pack ice like we do, and they won't bother you. General Chenzo of MD2 said in exasperation. Running a meaty hand through his moon-white hair, his full mane stood out starkly against his tanned skin. Feed them so they'll get healthy and fat and start breeding like rabbits. We'll go broke supplying the meat, Kitvian shot back. My interest in the proceedings waxed and waned depending on the subject. After a while I began to feel lightheaded and warm as the brandy influenced my body, since protocol dictated that I swallow when tasting for the commander. The generals voted on various topics, but the commander held the final vote. Mostly he ruled in favour of the majority. No one ventured to no one ventured a complaint when he didn't. Commander Ambrose had lived in MD3, scratching out a meagre existence with his family in the foothills of the Sole Mountains. Nestled between the mountains and the ice pack, his home was atop a vast diamond mine. When the rich find had been discovered, the king had claimed the diamonds and allowed the commander's family to live there and work in the mines. He lost many family members in cave-ins and to the damp and dirty environment. As a young man, seething at the injustices of the monarchy, Ambrose educated himself and began preaching about reform. His intelligence, bluntness, and pervasiveness gained him many loyal supporters. My mind focused back on the meeting when the generals reached issues regarding MD5. General Brazil caused a considerable stir. Instead of sliding around his best brandy, he sent a silver tray containing what looked like small brown stones. Valak handed one to me. It was a round drop of Brazil's Criollo. Before protests about ignoring tradition could escalate, Brazil rose and invited everyone to take a bite. After a brief moment of silence, exclamations of delight filled the war room. The Criollo was filled with strawberry brandy. I gave the commander the all clear sign so I could savour the rest of my morsel. The combination of the sweet, nutty taste of the Criollo mixed with the smooth texture of the brandy was divine. Rand would be upset that he hadn't thought of mixing the two, I supposed, then regretted feeling sorry for Rand as I envisioned his deceitful face. After the praise died down, Brazil made the announcement that the construction of his new factory was complete. Then he went on to the more mundane matters of how much wool had been sheared and the expected output of the cotton plantations. Military District 5 produced and dyed all the thread for Ixia and then sent it to General Francis, MD3, to be woven into fabric. Francis nodded his head in concern as he wrote down the figures Brazil quoted. He was the youngest of the generals and had the habit of tracing the purple diamonds on his uniform with a finger whenever he was concentrating. I dozed on my stool as fuzzy thoughts gathered like storm patrols and permits swirled like snowflakes. Then the images turned bright and sharp as a picture of a young woman dressed in white hunting furs snapped into my mind. She held a bloody spear high in the air in celebration. A dead snowcat lay at her feet. She slammed the tip of her weapon into the pack ice and drew a knife. Cutting a slash in the cat's fur, she used a cup to collect the blood that spilled out. She exulted as she drank, scarlet rivulets spilling down her chin. I heard her thoughts clearly in my mind. No one has managed this feat, she thought. No one but I. She shouted over the snow. Her exhilaration filled my heart. Proof that I am a strong, cunning hunter. Proof that my manhood was taken from me. Proof that I am a man. Men will not rule me any longer, she cried. Become the snowcat to live with the snowcats. Become a man to live with men. The hunter turned her face. At first, I took her to be the commander's sister. They shared the same thin, delicate features and black hair. She wore power and confidence like a cloak. Peering at my dreaming self, her gold almond-shaped eyes drove through me like a lightning strike. Sudden recognition that she was the commander jerked me awake. My heart pounded and my head thumped, and I realised I was staring directly into Mock Gan's searing gaze. He smiled with satisfaction. The commander's reason for hating magicians was as clear to me as glass. He was a she, but with the utter conviction that she should have been born a man. That cruel fate that had chosen to burden him with a mutation that he had to overcome, and the commander feared that a magician might pull this secret from his mind. Pure foolishness, I thought, shaking my head to dismiss the whole crazy notion. Just because I had dreamed about a woman didn't mean that the commander was one. It was absolute nonsense. Or was it? Rubbing my eyes, I glanced around to see if anyone else had noticed I had fallen asleep. The commander stared off into the distance, and Valak sat stiff and alert, scanning the room, seeking something or someone. General Tessor had the floor. Valak pulled his gaze back to the commander and bumped his arm in alarm. "What's going on?" he whispered urgently. "Where were you?" "Just remembering a time long ago," the commander said in a wistful voice. "More enjoyable than listening to General Tessor's excruciatingly detailed report on the corn harvest in MD4. I studied the commander's features, trying to superimpose the woman from my dream. They matched, but that meant nothing. Dreams twisted reality, and it was easy to envision the commander killing a snowcat. The rest of the meeting continued without incident, and I dozed on my stool from time to time, untroubled by strange dreams. When the commander pounded his gavel, I was awake in an instant. "Last item, gentlemen," the commander announced. "A Citian delegation has requested a meeting." The room erupted with voices. Arguments sprang to life as if the generals were picking up an old debate right where they had left off. They discussed trade treaties and quarrelled about attacking Scythia. Instead of trading for goods, why not take them? They argued. They wanted to expand their districts and gain more men and resources, ceasing all worries about Scythia attempting to attack Ixia. The commander sat in silence and let the flow of advice wash over him. The generals settled enough to proclaim their beliefs about allowing the Scythians to come. The four northern generals, Kipvian, Cenzo, Franis and Dino, didn't want to meet the delegation, while the four southern generals, Tessor, Rasmussen, Hazel and Brazil, favoured a summit with the Scythians. Wow. The commander shook his head. "I acknowledge your opinions about Scythia, but the Southerners would rather trade with us than attack us. We have more men and metal. A fact they are well aware of. To attack Scythia, we would expend many lives and large sums of money, and for what? Their luxury items aren't worth the cost. I'm content with this Ixia. We have cured the land of the king's disease. Perhaps my successor will want more. You'll have to wait until then. A murmur rippled through the generals. Brazil nodded in agreement, with his thin lips anchored in a predatory smile. I have already agreed to meet with the southern contingent, the commander continued. They're due to arrive in 4 days. You have until then to express your specific concerns to me before departing to your home districts. Meeting adjourned. The bang from the commander's gavel echoed throughout the dead silent room. The commander rose, and with his bodyguards and Valak close behind, he prepared to leave. Valak gestured for me to join them. I lurched to my feet. The full effect of the brandy had consumed, washed over me. Giddy, I followed the others from the room. An explosion of sound slipped through the door just before it closed behind us. That should stir things up a bit, the commander said with a wan smile. I would advise against vacationing in MD8 this year, Valak said sarcastically. The way Dino reacted to your announcement about the southern delegation, I would expect him to pepper your beach house with sand spiders, Valak shivered. A horrible, painful way to die. My skin crawled too, thinking of the lethal spiders the size of a small dog. Our procession continued in silence for a while as we headed back to the commander's suite. My gait was unsteady. The stone walls blurred past me, as if they were moving and I was the one standing still. Outside the commander's suite, Valak said I'd watch out for Rasmussen too. He didn't take the news of the change in your successor well. The commander opened his door. I stole a quick glance into his suite, the same plain utilitarian style that decorated his office, and the rest of the castle was present. What had I expected? Maybe a splash of colour, or something a bit more feminine. I gave my head a little shake to banish such absurd thoughts. The motion made my head spin, and I had to put a hand to the wall to keep myself from stumbling. I watch out for everyone, Valak. You know that, the commander said before shutting the door behind him. Upon entering our suite, Valak stripped off his uniform jacket and threw it on the couch. He pointed to a chair and said, "Sit. We need to talk." I plopped into the chair and dangled a leg over the armrest. Watching Valak pace the room in his sleeveless undershirt and form-fitting black pants, imagining my hands helping to ease the tension in the long ropey muscles of his arms, almost started a giggling fit. Brandy flowed through my blood, quickening my pulse. "Two things were very wrong tonight," Valak said. "Oh, come on. I just dozed off for a minute," I said in my defence. Valak shot me a quizzical look. No, you did fine. I meant about the meeting. The generals." He continued to pace. "First, Brazil seemed unusually happy about the change in successor and the Citian delegation. He's always wanted a trade treaty, but he typically exercises a more cautious approach. And second, there was a magician in the room." "What?" My breath locked. Had I been discovered? Magic, very subtle, from a trained professional. I only felt it once, a brief touch, but I couldn't pinpoint the source. but the magician had to be in the room or I wouldn't have felt it. When? During Tessor's long-winded dissertation about corn, Valak's posture had relaxed a little, as if the act of talking out a problem helped him deal with it. About the same time, your snoring could be heard halfway across the room. Ha! I said rather loud. You were so stiff at that meeting, I thought rigor mortis had set in. Valak snorted with amusement. I doubt you could have looked any better sitting in that uncomfortable uniform all night. I imagined Delana sprayed on extra starch with malicious glee. Then he grew serious again. Do you know Advisor Motgan? He eyed you most of the evening. I know him. He was Rayad's primary advisor. They also hunted together. What's he like? Valak said. Same kind of vermin as Rayad and Nix, I said. The words poured from my lips. I slapped both hands over my mouth, but it was too late. Valak studied me for a moment. Then he said, there were a number of new advisors at the meeting. I guess I'll have to check them out one by one. It seems we have a new southern spy with magic abilities, he sighed. It never ends. He dropped onto the edge of the couch as weariness settled on him like a coating of dust. If it did, you'd be out of a job. Before I could stop myself, I squeezed behind Valak and started to massage his shoulders. The alcohol had taken complete command of my movements, and the tiny sober section of my brain could do nothing but yell useless admonishments. And this is the yarn you've just watched being spun. Let's take it off. It's a little bit off, but once that's been washed, that'll be absolutely fine. Look at how bright that. Even the blue looks like a fluorescent purple. And then you get the fluorescent blue. Let me just do what I gotta do. There we go. Look at that. So, I hope you enjoyed the story. Well, the last two chapters, well, no, they're not the last, but I hope you've just enjoyed the few chapters that you listened to. I'm going to get this finished soon. So, yeah, I'm going to, when I finish this book, there will be a little gap in between the end of this one and the beginning of the next one because I've got to find it. It's somewhere in the house. I've got to find them all, really. I really can't face the attic under the eaves, but it's got to be done. Don't forget, I'm going to put it on end of every video now. Don't forget the 100-day knitting challenge, if you would like to join in, is going to be from the 1st of February to the 31st of May, which then gives us some time in between to get ready for Tour de Fleece. I'm going for it again this year. I'm going to do better than last year. Now I know what I'm doing. So, yes, there's the yarn. No matter where you are in the world, whether it's morning, afternoon, evening or night time, I want you to do what you love doing. Love and hugs to all you fantastic people out there, and I'll definitely see you all again very soon. Goodbye, my beautifuls. Mwah.